10 years ago, the brilliant Ayrton Senna started on pole position for the 65th and final time in his career here at the San Marino Grand Prix. He was already distraught from the death the day before of Roland Ratzenberger, and he too would lose his life that May weekend. I was in that Grand Prix and the images are burned very strongly in my mind. A decade later, the legend lives on.
He was a fantastic competitor. He was obviously an exceptional person and driver. And that's the good memories I have personally about him.
He was probably the fastest champion that I ever saw. He seemed to always be stretching the elastic, but my goodness was he quick.
We all know he was phenomenal with the throttle. As you know, he was in the middle of the corners. We used to hear that bam, bam, bam. He used to go. Nowadays, maybe it wouldn't work, but maybe nowadays he wouldn't be racing.
Senna had a brilliant career coming through the ranks. He also had a sixth sense, and he knew where the grip was before he arrived in the corner. This unique early footage of his first Formula One test shows how easily he took to the power of Grand Prix racing, sliding the car confidently around, immediately impressing Frank Williams.
He just went off a second quicker than the car had ever been around there, and then said, I think that's all right, I've got enough in my head, got out of the car and went home.
He was very complex, but not particularly difficult to read or to understand. He was just a dedicated, focused racing driver and set very high standards by which he drove the car and by which he raced. Above all else, Ayrton needed genuine friendship in a relationship to excel in his own chosen sport, and I think that's what we had.
Senna was undoubtedly the most eloquent and the most charismatic racing driver I have ever met. Senna in a press conference was spellbinding. He was one of the very few people I've ever seen anywhere, anytime, who could walk into a crowded room and the conversation would stop.
I mean, I've been around a few years, unfortunately, met an awful lot of drivers and a lot of people actually, not only just drivers, and he was something quite special.
He didn't want to get emotionally linked to anyone in a way. With a little glass of wine, he was fabulous.
The early 90s saw the emergence of another future multiple world champion in the shape of Michael Schumacher. In my view, Senna had a greater God-given skill, but Michael Schumacher applies it in a better way. Senna emotionally driven, Schumacher mentally driven.
Michael is fantastic using the car itself, but right now I think he's at the peak because he's using his experience. Maybe starting on, Ayrton was using more his talent and he could get more points. Michael didn't have that at the beginning, he crashed it too often. But now Michael is really good on race pace, and we could argue that maybe he could have been faster than Ayrton, but we will never know.
Senna was mystical. Senna had this charismatic personality, which, with the greatest respect in the world, Michael Schumacher does not. They both applied themselves to their business, driving Formula One racing cars, with equal intensity.
Imagine this, Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna in the same car at the same time. Who do you think would win the World Championship?
Again, very, very difficult to judge those two people. I mean, Ayrton never had the support that Michael has. Certainly Michael's been fortunate enough to have the best team and backup and everything else, which Ayrton never had. He had people in the team with him that wanted to beat him. I got a sneaking suspicion if he would have been still with us, that Michael certainly wouldn't have been 6 times world champion, and maybe he would have been twice or 3 times, and maybe Ayrton would have been 4 times.
Sadly, for motor racing fans all over the world, the epic battle between Senna and Schumacher was only just underway. Ayrton Senna had a massive impact on Formula One during his lifetime, and probably an even greater impact after his death. Let's let the great man himself have the final word.
Once you do something like this and you succeed, you have difficulties that you have to fix. Not all of them are technical, many of them are difficulties in your mind. All of us who are trying to beat the limits and be the number one.